In the chill of an early autumn evening, the quaint town of Eldridge Hollow whispered with the rustling of golden leaves. The fading sun cast long shadows, reaching like fingers across the cracked sidewalks. Amid this serene decay, Julia Ames, a fervent true crime podcaster known for her ability to unearth the darkest secrets, wandered the desolate streets. Her recorder was clutched tightly in one hand, a beacon in the twilight, capturing every eerie silence and the occasional distant howl. Julia's podcast, Voices from the Void, had gained a cult following for shedding light on the cold and forgotten. Her latest subject was Eldridge Hollow's own unsolved mystery, the disappearance of the town's mayor 30 years ago. A story submerged in rumors of betrayal, witchcraft, and an ancient curse. The setting of Eldridge Hollow was that of a forgotten place. Its glory days long past. Buildings, once proud monuments of small-town prosperity, now stood as hollowed husks, their windows dark and unwelcoming. The air carried a dampness that seemed to seep into the bones, and the sky, a blanket of unyielding gray, promised the early arrival of night. Julia's research had brought her to the local library, a structure untouched by time, its architecture a haunting blend of Gothic spires and creeping ivy. Inside, the librarian, an elderly woman named Mrs. Holloway with eyes too sharp for her age, provided Julia with dusty newspapers and faded photographs. Yet, with each bit of knowledge gained, Julia felt an increasing sense of unease, as though each page turned was a step deeper into forbidden territory. The heart of the town's dread lay in the tale of Mayor Hawthorne, who vanished without a trace during the annual Harvest Festival, a night when the townsfolk indulged in age-old rites purported to ward off evil spirits from their midst. Whispered tales suggested he had been a man marked by darkness, obsessed with occult practices that led to his undoing. The last sighting of him was near the old Wickerwood, a place locals avoided, where the trees were said to scream under the full moon. As night encroached, Julia found her way to the Wickerwood's edge. The trees stood like sentinels, their branches gnarled and twisting skyward, forming a barrier of shadows. Armed with her recorder and a flashlight, she ventured into the woods. Her heart pounded with a mix of dread and excitement. This was her element, unraveling mysteries that lay buried in the shadows. The deeper Julia ventured, the more the forest seemed to close in around her. The air grew colder, and the path, barely visible under the thick underbrush, seemed to pulse with a life of its own. It was here that Julia stumbled upon an old, decrepit shack, half swallowed by the earth. Its door, barely hanging on its hinges, creaked ominously as she pushed it open. Inside, the air was thick with the smell of mold and decay. Her flashlight beam danced across the walls, revealing symbols that made her skin crawl, pentagrams, and other esoteric sigils, crudely etched into the wood. In the center of the room lay a circle of stones, blackened by fire, surrounded by remnants of what looked disturbingly like bone. Julia's recorder captured every detail, her voice barely a whisper as she described the scene. Yet, as she spoke, an inexplicable fear gripped her, a feeling of being watched. The forest seemed to respond to her presence, the wind howling through the trees, growing in intensity. Julia's mind raced with thoughts of Mayor Hawthorne's last night, had he stood in this very spot, summoning something he could not control. The flashlight flickered, and in the darkness, Julia heard whispers, disjointed and chilling. They seemed to echo from the very walls of the shack, growing louder until they were drowned out by a deafening scream from the forest. Terrified but determined, Julia ran from the shack, the beam of her flashlight cutting through the suffocating darkness. Branches clawed at her, as if trying to hold her back. Her heart was thundering in her chest as she emerged from the woods, the screams still echoing behind her. Breathless, Julia reached the safety of her car, slamming the door shut and locking it. She sat there panting, her mind reeling. The recorder, still running, had captured it all, the sounds, her fear, the unexplainable phenomena. As she drove away from Wickerwood, her car's headlights cut a lonely path through the fog that had begun to settle over Eldritch Hollow. Back in her hotel room, Julia reviewed the recordings. The whispers were there, clear as day, and a voice amongst them. A plea, leave us. The implication was as terrifying as it was clear. This mystery was not meant to be disturbed. Yet, the allure of the unknown, the drive to uncover the truth, pulled at her like a siren's call. The following night, Julia found herself drawn back to the woods, compelled by a force she couldn't understand. She walked the same path into the heart of darkness. The shack awaited, more menacing than before. Inside, the circle of stones seemed to pulsate with an unholy energy. Julia, caught in a trance, began to speak into the recorder, her voice not her own, recounting the tale of Mayor Hawthorne as if she had witnessed it herself. He had called forth something ancient and malevolent that night, binding it to his bloodline, cursing all who would dare uncover his secrets. As she spoke, the wind rose, and the shack trembled. Shadows swirled around her, coalescing into the form of Mayor Hawthorne, his eyes hollow pools of despair. He spoke of the curse, his voice a chilling whisper carried on the wind. Anyone who delved into his story would awaken the wrath of what he had summoned. With his final word, the apparition vanished, and Julia collapsed, the recorder falling from her limp hand. When she awoke, dawn was breaking. The recorder lay beside her, its battery dead. Julia stumbled from the shack, her mind a whirl of terror and confusion. She left Wickerwood behind, the morning light doing little to dispel the darkness that had settled in her soul. Voices from the void went silent after that. Julia never spoke of what occurred in Eldritch Hollow, but the recordings remained hidden away, a testament to a truth too horrifying to share. Yet the whispers never left her, a constant reminder that some mysteries are better left alone, buried in the shadows of forgotten towns. Here lies Jonathan Corbett, wronged and forgotten. A gasp escaped her lips. Jonathan Corbett, the name was familiar. A piece of lore her parents had once discussed. He was a man accused of witchcraft, buried alive near the old Monroe property. His innocence was proven too late. As realization dawned, a cold wind swept through the chamber, extinguishing her flashlight and plunging her into darkness. Heart racing, she felt a presence behind her, the air shifting. A hand, cold and firm, settled on her shoulder, and a voice, clearer now, whispered, "Thank you." Bolting from the chamber, Alice didn't stop until she burst into the night air, the house looming silently behind her. The figure was gone, and in the nights that followed, it did not return. But the air around the old Monroe house felt lighter, somehow, as if a long-held breath had been finally released. Alice never spoke of that night, keeping the secret of Jonathan Corbett's restless spirit to herself. The town continued to whisper its ghost stories in the misty evenings. But Alice knew better now. She knew that sometimes, beneath the layers of legend and fear, there were just truths waiting to be uncovered, and souls waiting to be set free.